Today we've got an absolutely incredible story for you. It's about how one of Pakistan's biggest textile groups, a company that makes t-shirts and fabrics, ended up building a massive power plant that became a cornerstone of the entire national grid. It's a wild tale of crisis, innovation, and some seriously complex politics.
So yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? How on earth does a t-shirt maker get into the business of powering a country? It seems like a huge leap, going from textiles to turbines. But as you're about to see, this pivot wasn't some random business venture. It was a decision born out of a full-blown national emergency.
To really get how this all went down, we need to rewind the clock a bit. So let's head back to the mid-2000s in Pakistan, because the challenges happening at that time really set the stage for this entire story.
Now, the country was facing some pretty intense economic pressure back then, but there was one problem, one single issue that stood out above everything else, and it was threatening to bring the country's entire industrial sector to a grinding halt. We are talking about severe, crippling power shortages. The national grid just could not keep up with the demand. This led to something called load shedding, basically scheduled rolling blackouts that would hit for hours every single day all across the country.
And for a country with a huge industrial base, this was, a complete disaster. Just try to imagine running a factory when the power could just vanish at any second. Well, that was the exact problem facing one of the biggest names in textiles, the Nishat Chunian Group. Their operations were getting absolutely hammered.
So faced with this crisis that threatened their very existence, the company's leaders did something pretty radical. They didn't just go out and buy a few more generators for their own factories. Nope, they made a much bigger, much bolder, and way more unconventional choice.
In February of 2007, it was official. They incorporated Nishat Chunian Power Limited, or NCPL for short. This was it. This was the historic pivot. They weren't just trying to solve their own power problem anymore. They were officially getting into the business of solving the entire nation's power problem.
And let's be really clear here. They set themselves up as an independent power producer, or an IPP. This detail is absolutely crucial. What it means is that NCPL was a private company and its one and only customer was the government. They were building this giant plant with the specific goal of generating electricity and selling it right into the national grid for everybody.
Okay, so you decide to build a massive power plant. How do you actually do that? This wasn't some small side hustle. We're talking about a state-of-the-art engineering marvel. Let's take a look at the machine they actually built.
Now, what's really interesting when you look at these details is the tech. I mean, you can see they went all out. They partnered with the Finnish giant Wärtsilä to install 11 of these enormous, super-efficient engines. This was not some old, cheap technology. This was top-of-the-line stuff, designed for serious reliability and peak performance, all running on residual furnace oil.
And this right here shows just how focused they were on efficiency. NCPL didn't just install some engines. They built what's called a combined cycle plant. So instead of letting all the incredible heat from those 11 engines just, escape into the atmosphere as waste, they captured it. That captured heat was then used to boil water, create steam, and power an entirely separate steam turbine, which generated even more electricity. It's brilliant. They were getting free energy from their own waste heat. And on July 21, 2010, the plant officially went live. It hit what's called its commercial operations date, pumping a gross capacity of 200 megawatts of desperately needed power right into Pakistan's national grid. That's enough to power hundreds of thousands of homes and businesses. So the plant was a huge technical success, right? It was a critical piece of the grid, but it very quickly ran headfirst into this massive, uniquely Pakistani financial paradox that threatened to sink the entire operation. And that paradox is called circular debt. You really can't tell the story of a Pakistani power company without talking about this. To put it simply, it's a giant, messy chain of debt. It starts when the single buyer, the government, can't pay its suppliers, the power plants, on time. And that creates a domino effect. The power plants then can't pay their suppliers for fuel, and on it goes.
So check this out. Here's how the circular debt mess played out. NCPL had a contract that said they had to be ready to provide power, 24/7, no excuses. And to do that, they had to keep buying fuel. But their only customer, the government, was chronically late with its payments. So get this, NCPL was having to borrow money just to buy fuel to keep the lights on for the very customer that wasn't paying them. It's a crazy situation.
Well, that tension just built and built over the years, creating huge cash flow problems. It all finally came to a head around 2020, which led to some very tense negotiations. And, in the end, a landmark compromise between the power producers and the state. Then, in February 2021, a breakthrough. NCPL, along with other power producers, signed a new master agreement with the government. The whole thing was framed as a deal made in the national interest, designed to solve the crisis and bring down the overall cost of electricity for the country. So, what was the deal? Well, NCPL had to make a big sacrifice. They agreed to change the original terms of their 25-year contract to accept a lower rate of profit. And in exchange for that, the government agreed to a clear payment plan to finally pay off the billions in overdue bills it owed. This was a massive turning point that really changed the company into something more like a utility.
This timeline really puts their whole journey into perspective. You see it all. Created in '07 to fight a crisis, going live in 2010, battling those insane circular debt problems, and then totally reshaping its future with that 2021 agreement. And today, it's still a crucial baseload plant. That means it's one of those reliable workhorses the grid depends on day in and day out.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, the legacy of Nishat Chunian Power is really a story of resilience. It's this powerful symbol of how the private sector can step up to solve huge national problems, even when the circumstances are incredibly tough. For more than 15 years, it's been providing reliable power, and it remains a critical pillar for grid stability, especially in Pakistan's industrial heartland. It's a fascinating case study.
And that leaves us with one final big thought. NCPL was a solution for its time, built to solve a crisis with the best tech they had. But as we all know, the world is shifting fast towards renewables like solar and wind. So what happens to these vital, reliable thermal plants that literally form the backbone of our modern world? What is their role going forward? And what will their ultimate legacy be? It's a huge question that countries all over the globe are grappling with right now.